So we are live with the Node.js release working group meeting on the 11th of March 2021, and we will start by working through the items on the agenda, which is in the Node.js release issue 651. I'll go ahead and share my screen to get started. But while I'm doing that, are there any announcements people would like to make? Nope. I guess one thing to mention is Node 16 is due out in about, I think, around 5 to 6 weeks time. So we're actually starting to do some test builds of that just to check infrastructure and things are running smoothly. And we'll start by going through the release plans one by one. So for Node 15, we're scheduled all the way up until end of April, so not much to discuss there. For 14, I think we're still trying to get a collaborative effort together to land some items on the 14x branch. I did see a ping on the call yesterday where someone mentioned that there was a bit of a backlog of things that needed to land on the 14 release line. I haven't run branch diff for a while, but I'm expecting it to be like over 1,000, if not 2,000. So it might end up being more of an opt-in rather than us triaging the whole list.
Yeah. On the subject of 14 specifically, I'm pairing with Benko to lend some of the work he had backlogged for stack traces and source maps. So I'm probably going to be landing some commits, the backporting on the staging branch.
Okay, so that kind of lands with our kind of opt-in kind of stuff, the items that have explicitly been called out as being needed to land on the branch rather than us triaging that massive list.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So yeah, I guess we'll see how that goes. We probably need to bump the schedule now. In terms of release candidate time frame, it looks like we may even start pushing into April if we want to give the full 3 weeks, and that's if we can get enough landed to warrant doing release over the next couple of weeks. Any concerns there particularly, or are we still going to aim towards doing a 7 soon?
I think this begs the question: do we want to maybe change the policy on LTS to an opt-in kind of thing and communicate that better to the rest of the collaborators, if that's the case?
So like rather than saying we will triage everything that lands in current, we will say, please notify the release team, add the LTS watch label for anything you believe should land on the 14x release line.
Yeah, and I think like that's a big discussion to have. So
yeah,
I mean, just yeah.
I guess it is a big discussion, but it's also somewhat reflective of, from what I've seen, where we land with LTS after maybe 6 months, because it's kind of like inevitable that the delta grows and then we end up moving to an opt-in like partway through active LTS. So I don't know.
So,
carry on.
Thinking about that, like, and maybe this is something we can explore for 16 perhaps. Like we've classically had maintenance be this like really strict, like we won't land anything unless it's like, you know, like really important or security. And then we end up having to kind of like bend that when there's certain things that we want to land. And then the flip side is active is like this contract that we can never really keep up with. Like, and we've talked about switching the dates a bit. Maybe we could change what maintenance means, or just call it something else, like LTS versus active LTS or something like that. And only do 6 months of the active keeping things up to date. And then for the rest of the LTS, it's kind of that hey, when it like makes sense and when it's asked for, kind of like a push model rather than a pull model. And that could afford us a bit more flexibility in the maintenance life cycle of the releases. I guess it, like, in theory, would maybe mean that we could potentially have more churn on a release later in its life cycle, but I think like the odds of that happening are pretty low. But what it would mean would be like maybe we'd have more flexibility to do a minor if we had to, or more flexibility to like for example, we just saw this FS promises thing where like there's the massive like 500 times speed improvements that have been noticed, and we'll probably just decide to land that on maintenance anyways. So it kind of doesn't feel like that's too different. Wonder what people think about that.
Well, I think the issue we're seeing with 14 is we've not done a Semver minor at all since it went into LTS. So even if you were to say 6 months of actively backward, we're not doing that at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
that was the problem.
Not going to solve the problem we're actually seeing right at this moment in time with 14. And yes, we have changed dates and things before, but I think the main problem we've got with this one is just time that people devote to doing it. And obviously, the longer it goes on before we do the minor, the bigger the diff gets. To the point that it might have to be selective just because there's just so much that's accumulated since October.
Yeah, so I guess we would have aimed to do like in the Q4 time frame, like one minor, but that got pushed out for various reasons, security releases, time of us. Particularly what I find is because the patch releases that we have done were very much regression fixes and opt-in and security releases. We don't have such lengthy requirements on like the release candidate phase for those. For most of those, and I do find it a bit of a struggle to kind of put together a minor release, bearing in mind the backlog and also bearing in mind the massive like 3 weeks. Like that's a long period of time to have something on my list. Maybe that's just conceptually, but it does mean work over a longer spread of time rather than picking up a release and getting it out and say over the period of a week or two.
I think historically also, and I know that I've been one of the advocates for those RC cycles just to kind of like keep it going, but I don't think historically people have really tested them. So I don't think there's too many instances that we've run into where like during those 3 weeks we found something major.
My experience is that the people that pick up the RCs tend to be the ones that we ask to test to see whether it's fixed the problem they've previously reported before we put the release out.
And in that case, I'm not particularly sure like it warrants the 3 weeks or a lengthy period of time so much, because if we can pass it to them and they can check it and say yes, in my experience, that's been quite quick, typically.
Yeah.
The other thing is where we commit to only doing like one Semver minor per quarter, part of the reason it's been pushed out and we've been like, well, for 14, because I've done a few of the recent months, is because I feel like I don't have enough time to get a good enough chunk of stuff on the staging branch to warrant the minor release, but I do have time to get a few bits on. So maybe we're happy putting out Semver minor releases out where there's only maybe 4, 5, or like a small number of actual feature additions. But I guess because we only do it once per quarter, mine was like, I really want to dedicate enough time to get everything back that we can at this point. Because if we commit to only doing one per quarter, people then have to wait. So you really want to make sure you've included what you can. But as a result, we've ended up pushing it out and the backlog's got bigger. So there's a lot more work for us. So not sure on the best approach to go forward with at this point.
And one of the things is we have this, I can't remember if we've written this down as a policy, but this idea that things should flow back through the LTS lines in order. So preferably they would land in 14 before they're landed in 12. But it does mean now that some of the 12 backports are being held up by things not being in a 14 release yet.
So Richard, for what it's worth, historically, When I was managing two LTS branches, I would not flow back through LTSs. So like it would land on both LTSs at the same time.
Right.
It was like when I was doing, I guess, like 6 and 8 and 8 and 10.
Okay.
So for what it's worth, well, it can be maybe confusing to folks if, for example, 12 has something that 14 doesn't. I think for the exact reason that you pointed out, it's not necessarily very pragmatic to have to like waterfall through every single release.
Okay.
I guess there's also the consideration that like 12's in maintenance at the moment, and I think we have seen this for 14 and 12 at the moment, where putting out a new feature on a maintenance release but not the active one, the optics of that might be a little strange. So I think we'd at least try to align the releases roughly at the same time, so people aren't saying, hey, why has this maintenance release got a new feature before the active LTS? But then aligning dates across releases just introduces more problems in terms of our availability and having to commit to that. So I guess for the next steps on 14, maybe it's worth taking a look to see how much is on the staging branch and seeing whether we can say, yes, there's enough to just maybe create a proposal, and what we land in that proposal on a given date goes out, even if it's slightly smaller than we expect. What have we got on there? We have a reasonable number of items on there, actually. Well, typically our Semver miners, I think, have been around 100 commits, and we've got like 20, 25 maybe, if I can guess these lines. And I'm imagining we have some open backports as well. So
yeah, just about the staging branch. Last week, I tried to cherry pick some commits. I focused on the dependency updates. That's most of what you see in the latest commits. And other commits were very quickly becoming a problem because of conflicts.
Yeah.
And at that time, when I compared with V15, there were about 650 commits to review.
okay. Sure. Thanks for landing those. Good to get the depths updates in, because picking up the bug fixes and such. I guess if we landed all of these, if we could, if they all passed, etc., that would be another 10, well, about 7 PRs, but probably about 10 commits or so. And it might be worth looking at how much has the label LTS watch.
Yeah,
See how much, if we did go for opt-in just to try and get a miner out, not many, another 8, so there'd be maybe 30, 40 commits. Would that be enough to warrant putting the Semver miner out just to get one out for the features that we've been told, or would people prefer that we push it out again and do try to get through some of those commits, the 650 or so, or however many they are, to pull some more items in? I guess what's the priority here? Getting a miner out now or in the next month or so, perhaps before 16 goes out, or building up a reasonable number of commits so to warrant doing the miner release and making it a bit more featureful?
So I guess the first question would be, who's volunteering to do the work? And I think I just defer to whoever is going to do the work to kind of get as much as they can get done. And maybe it would be better just to kind of like pick a date.
Okay, I just saw your comment. There's a few additional ones. Did I accidentally turn my sound off, or is there just no major problems?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello. Okay. I was just gonna say, like, I don't know who's volunteering to do this, but if someone's volunteering, maybe they could just try to get as much as they can get done and just call a date and like make it Semver minor so that they could, like, I personally think keeping it Semver minor makes it easier to do the backports because then you're not like having to not land certain things.
Yeah.
I can offer to pitch in for like maybe 1 or 2 backporting sessions if that would be helpful. Maybe we could all just like take turns pitching in, but let's just try to get as much as we can get done, and whatever's ready by that date, that's what goes. And we could do a call to the project for Semver minors. And if folks have specific things that they're looking for, they can, you know, ask and hopefully help with the backport.
Sounds good.
Sure. Yeah, I can certainly commit to running like branch diff landing what I can, async, and I could possibly commit to doing the release once we've got some bits together, unless anyone else would like to do that release as an LTS release. The main thing I can't commit to is like getting through that whole 650 or getting through a large amount and doing the release, because that would be a lot, I think. Where would be the best place to do that call, Miles, for Semver minors?
Maybe we could post something on the like core team. So like we know that everyone gets pinged, and then, you know, someone can get grumpy and be like, don't message this list, it gives us all an email. And then we can be like, that was the point.
Sure. Yeah, I guess we can, do a, like on the collaborators discussions or something, say.
I guess the other way to quickly get people to say what they want in the next December minor would be to open a proposal, and people can spot what's missing.
That's true. Yeah.
We usually get 1 or 2, don't we, requests to squeeze PRs in.
I think that the longer we leave it open, the more we get, kind of thing. So it's like we constantly recreate the RCs because it's been open an extra week and a few more pairs of eyes have seen it and asked for stuff to go in. So yeah, maybe that is a good plan.
Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily need to do an RC as soon as we open.
No.
We could do. It's not that expensive to do the RC. It's just the displace, isn't it?
And we could do a like TBD date if we wanted to, or something like that.
Yeah. And maybe just be honest and say this is what we've currently got, and we're struggling a bit to keep. Well, I don't know if we're struggling, but you know, it may not catch up to everything that might otherwise have gone in. Yeah.
Yeah. Is anyone particularly interested in opening that draft proposal up? As it's a draft, I'm sure that's not committing to doing the release in full. So if anyone would like to get that opened as a kind of like work in progress, any interest particularly? I don't mind getting one together if no one else would like to. I can probably get one together this week or so, draft, if no one else would like the opportunity. Okay, so we'll go with that for now. I think for 14 is best effort to try and get the minor moving forwards. Where are we in terms? We're the 11th of March today, right? So it's probably unlikely to go out in March. I guess it'd be start of April at this point, but I guess leave that there to see how it fits. And do we need to go through the rest of this schedule? I'm not sure whether a minor in May would make sense, but maybe leaving room for it in case folks do want to get some new features in at that point.
Yeah, I guess if we assume that we're not going to get all minors into the next minor.
Yeah.
I'd be inclined to leave the dates for the moment. We can always move it.
Yeah.
Next month or. You know,
main concern is the next release, right?
Yes.
We can think about everything else afterwards.
Cool.
Sure. Okay, that sounds like a reasonable plan to get things moving a bit, and hopefully we get some feedback from folks asking for minors and such. Okay, 12. I don't think the state's particularly changed. Oh, maybe aside from that FS promises thing that was mentioned.
Yeah, it's not in here. The PR that's gone into master. I don't think it's gone out in current yet, but the question's in about backporting it into LTS because the performance gap between the promises version of the FS APIs and the non-promises versions is quite large.
Mhm.
So Miles has got the code into 15, but I think it needs manual backports for 14 and 12.
Okay.
The discussion in the PR was whether it could go into the LTS lines, and I don't particularly object as long as you do it carefully.
Yep. Yeah, same. So it sounds like as long as it's labeled like LTS watch or backport requested and a backport pops up, when that's there, we'll probably have the discussion about when to ship it out, because I think we do have a couple of things on the 12 branch waiting to go out as well. So
yes, and there are still some open backports that
yeah,
I think I've got 1 or 2 in, and there's another one that I can get in.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are building up things for 12
gradually.
gradually. And yeah, back to the earlier discussion about Semver miners going out in 12 that haven't gone out in 14 yet. But there's not that many.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be okay if that happened, but
it's particularly around things like that event loop utilize. I mean, that's a minor that is on 14 staging, I think now, but it's not going out in release. But I could pull that into 12, just waiting there.
Yeah, ready to go. Yeah, I think at this point that makes sense. Let's land what we can. Let's not hold off landing minors now, because it's been a long time since we've done feature full minors for both. So let's just land what we can, get 14 out when we can, and it probably makes sense for 12 to hold off until at least the promises backport's open and landed. And then that sounds like a good time to set a date to get that release out.
Yeah, I'll keep 12 updated. I don't mind doing that.
Sure. Thanks, Richard. So in terms of 10, I don't think there's much to discuss. Has anyone heard anything about 10? I've not for a while. Which is
no, not that I'm aware of.
So maybe it's worth taking a look, see if there's any lingering backports, or I'm not sure I've seen many. We did a good roundup release, and 10 goes end of life next month, right?
Indeed.
So, nope. So I think we're good there. So fingers crossed we won't need to do another 10.
Can you check if there's anything on LTS watch?
Oh, okay. I think there might be. 43.
Okay.
The ones that would be most interesting. Yeah, but these were opened in like September.
Yeah, I don't see anything in there that I would particularly pull out. I mean, I am at the stage with 10 now that unless someone really pushes for things, I'm not really inclined to pull anything back in. And the only thing I might consider is if there was something fundamental to like build infrastructure or something like that. But again, there's nothing that I'm aware of.
Okay. Sure. So other item, I guess we've gone through all the release lines. It makes sense to quickly spin open the 16x. Just FYI, we have quite a exhaustive policy on the steps we must follow for a major release line. For example, we state that we will cut the branches 3 months in advance. We will start creating the proposal 2 months in advance. And actually, from what I've found, is there's not much benefit from doing that. And I think a few times the dates have slipped. So I'm wondering whether it makes sense to open a PR to update those kind of like exhaustive requirements and maybe loosen them a bit to just say 6 weeks before the build, 6 weeks before the release, we start test builds. And that kind of assumes that we've created the branches and the proposals. Would anyone have seen any benefit to creating these branches earlier in particular?
Only if someone had time to run things like Citium to spot problems.
Yeah, the other thing...
It's a bit in my mind, it's a bit awkward to open them early because normally the V8 updates go in quite late and they're the ones that are the most disruptive.
Yeah.
Not the only things that are disruptive, but in terms of just code churn, V8 updates tend to change quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I think we're still waiting, aren't we, for the next V8 to merge next week or something.
Yeah.
For 16. So we can open them early, but the only benefit for that is if we're actively running and monitoring the test results to spot things that might need to be addressed.
Yeah. The other thing is before this December major cutoff, it's just a mirror of the main branch. So in theory, we should catch most things, like when folks run Citium on the main branch or run CI on the main branch, and as PRs go in, there are some infrastructure things it's worth opening them, like the 16x branch, to check things work on that side.
Yeah, actually, that is a good point.
Yeah, so I think I had a chat with Ash recently, and on the releases MD file, we kind of like came to the decision that we should probably have a checklist in there to say, when we're creating a major release, please open a build issue with these tick boxes, because I don't think we have that checklist yet, the like build infra major release checkbox of what needs to happen, like adding the drop downs. And
that's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things we need to do and build way in advance of the major release.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want that in the release.
Yeah, the kind of ones I was thinking of like were like this. I don't know if the sim links need to be manually created and whether.
I forget. I do know where that tool is. I forget whether that's automatic now or whether we still need to update it.
I think Rod might have opened a PR to mention the snap stuff needing to be called out. So maybe he started that list anyway.
That was for LTS transitions, not the majors.
Yeah. So in a similar vein, though, something like that, just to heads up.
Yeah.
And on another related topic that I haven't raised an issue for, which I probably should, was around the December major cutoff. From the major releases that I've done, I don't think there's ever been an instance of us saying we're not including that major. Like everything's always been like, yes, we're happy to pull that in. There's never been any objections. And the one time there was an objection, I think it was for a certain deprecation, we actually reverted it. Like we opened a revert PR for that one. So I do wonder whether, do we still need the December major cutoff, or does it need to be a month? Could it be like 2 weeks? In the past, I've tried to freeze the code on like the exact 7 days before. So in this case, it'd be like the 13th, just so that the changelog can be finalized and like no one's going to be up at night the day before the release picking things in. So I don't know if there are any thoughts on that, about the value of December major cutoff and whether people have seen that value.
I can't remember if it was the last major or the one before. There was one where we diverged V8 to have forward compatibility patches. So they landed in the major branch, but the master branch just had the V8 update as was. so there were differences.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I can't remember. I think that might have been 2 releases ago. It was one where we had some plan as to which V8 versions would go into that major, and to enable that, we had compatibility patches to take that V8 version that was there at the moment to a later ABI. So in that case, the V8 was slightly different in the major branch versus the one on master.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of any other majors that were excluded without sort of the full revert on master.
Yeah.
What was the reason for this Semver major cutoff?
The main motivation was to stop things being dropped in kind of at the last minute, like 10 major PRs being dropped in and breaking the ecosystem without any time for us to really, we've gone through Stitchem thoroughly and socialized any changes or anything like that. But my kind of thoughts are,
well, that makes sense.
my thoughts are like, if we think it's going to be too disruptive to the ecosystem at this point of time, what is the benefit of landing like something on the main branch before the ecosystem's ready to kind of accept it? Like, and it's not going to get extra testing, aside from maybe from collaborators and people building head themselves.
Well, it comes back to the nightlies and whether anyone's actively doing much with the nightly builds, because the nightlies are built for master.
What if we changed the policy a bit and removed kind of this cutoff, but keep opening the proposal like you did at least 1 month in advance or more, so that it's clear for everyone what are going to be the several major changes. And if more come up before the release goes out, then I don't know, we put something in the policy that says we should ping, we should still ping the TSC or something like that. But that's almost what we do now anyway.
Yeah, right, because the TSC are being pinged as each item lands on the main branch.
I mean, Semver majors require 2 TSC signups anyway, don't they?
Yeah.
So the only question would be anything landing that you possibly didn't want to land, but then in that case, we'd probably stick a blocked or waiting label of some sort.
Yeah, so there was some concern about like, we don't want to hold up development on like the head branch because of the upcoming major release. But I don't think we're going to see it, to be honest, based on what I've seen, and there's never been any objections raised, and if they have been, it's been completely reverted. As long as we do have a code freeze of some kind a week or N days in advance, so that there's not a lot of last minute churn.
I mean, even with the code freeze for 15, we still had to revert quite a few screen commits, didn't we? After we went out.
Yes, because like despite having RC builds and test builds and things,
so it wasn't like it wasn't like splitting the branches and having the thing sort of prevented that.
No.
But for V16, when are you going to stop rebasing on master and diverging the branch?
My ideal would be like the major could just be the 13th, like whatever on head on the 13th, the week before. I don't see any reason it would need to diverge if we remove the Semver major cutoff.
Yeah, if we can completely remove it, I agree.
But if not, it's typically like as our policy was written, it was like 4 weeks. So exactly 4 weeks before the 20th. So whatever 4 Tuesdays before that would be, which would be soon actually. 20.
Well, maybe it's worth opening a change to the policy, then pinging the TSC and see if anyone objects.
Mm-hmm. Okay, try that. I think that would simplify things and save having to like call for objections every time a major lands on main for like a month, because
I guess the only thing the cutoff does is try to hurry along any December majors that haven't landed yet to try and meet some sort of arbitrary date.
Yeah. But I guess setting the code freeze at another arbitrary date that might have the same incentive just a couple of weeks later or something. So okay, I can open a draft PR to kind of suggest that, to see what the kind of thoughts are from the wider folks, including the TSC. I think it would just save us having to like reach out, say, hey, you happy for this to be included, and people not seeing it. Or okay. But yeah, test build, I have kicked off a test build. I haven't linked to it yet. But I think as of next week, probably do RC0 and then each week. I tend to just mirror from the main branch until a major appears, and then I would start cherry picking. But if we can get some thoughts and feedback on scrapping the major cutoff, then it would just be a mirror. Like each week, this branch would just be a mirror of whatever head was on Tuesday, and we'd turn that into a release candidate build. Sure. Other items on the agenda, I realized we didn't type them out as we added them. What was next? Was it NPM 7 and Node 14?
Yeah, there is a discussion thread, so I pasted that into the chat.
Let me bring it.
Unfortunately, it's a discussion which we don't seem to be able to label. There's no easy way other than putting a direct link.
We need to do a GitHub feature request.
That was, as far as I can recollect, I believe the NPM team expressed a sort of soft idea that we could drop 7 into 14, but there was no actual commit or that we would do that. It was kind of a wait and see. That was my recollection of the discussion.
Sure. Yeah,
honestly, I think
answer.
it's risky.
Mm-hmm.
Having worked with NPM 7 for a few months now, I know that there are many cases where it just throws when you try to install. It just fails because there are issues with peer dependencies when it was just warning in NPM 6. Yes, we could hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I was trying to say I synced up with the rest of the team yesterday, and I think we have a consensus that, yeah, it's too risky to try to backport it. So yeah, I think we'd rather not backport it to Node 14 or previous LTS releases for now.
Okay, is that kind of like a point in time we'll readdress in a couple of months kind of thing?
Yeah, it's looking like it may not be possible. Like, it's just too risky, right? There are subtle breaking changes on top of the larger peer dependencies.
Yeah.
So yeah, all in all, I think it might be too risky. So we might just have to live with having to support NPM 6 for a little longer. But yeah, NPM 6 is basically just maintenance mode now. So we'll only really land security patches or
critical updates.
Yeah. I think that's the plan for now.
Yeah. Certainly that was where my kind of mindset was like, I did think it was slightly too risky at this point in time. Maybe before 14 goes into maintenance, we could have another discussion. But I guess my gut would be, if it doesn't happen before we go into maintenance, then possibly we'll just stick with 6.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good. Comfortable with that kind of. So is there anyone can respond on this discussion? Maybe we should leave it to NPM folks, maybe Roy or Miles, maybe.
Yeah, no, I can reply to that.
Okay, good to hear. Any other thoughts on that, particularly from anyone else?
No, I'm happy with that position.
Sounds good. And I think we did mention one other thing to be tagged onto the agenda, but again, didn't write it down. Can anyone remember what?
It was the second thing in the chat, which was the regression in Node 15. That was a property that was added to the response object that linked back to the request, but it was non-enumerable. So anyone that was currently setting it no longer could.
Mm-hmm.
So it was something that was tagged minor, but in retrospect, it should have been major.
So so in general, what does it mean that if we add a getter to a public object, we should consider it a major change? Or was it special because this property was very common?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, I think there is already a Band-Aid patch sent by Colin if you scroll down the end. So I think we might just want to do that for now.
Okay,
but,
so that appears to be backing it out. Is that backing out the whole change on the main branch?
No, I think it's just making the thing enumerable, so you can write to
it. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not a complete revert. It's just making sure that that particular property can be written to.
Seems like I can see a pin is approved. Like, I feel kind of comfortable that if this goes in, it should be picked up by the next Fix 15 release and be resolved. Is there anything more we need to consider on this one? I guess what Michael said around having a policy, or is this like something that's happened because of just the popularity of this particular case or something? So it doesn't warrant a general policy.
I mean, I'm happy, given what that says there, I'm happy with to land that PR that's open and put that in 15.
Yeah.
I guess the more general question about if things are introduced that are non-enumerable, whether that automatically makes them major is, I guess, a question for the TSC, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on whether it's an object that's sort of public versus something that's internal only. I mean, this one is public because it's handed off to fallback. I'm
going to ask the question on the issue.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, sounds good. Was there anything further to go through today? I think those were the main things we mentioned. I guess I saw that we now have a like 16x tracker for failures in Sitchin. So I guess I'll try and keep that updated as I run Sitchin on the proposal. perhaps we can close the 15 one. I'm not sure. Okay. Nothing further to discuss on the agenda. I guess we'll close that out here. And I guess speak to you all next time.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.